You've been looking pretty good these last few weeks, man.
Yeah, I got a secret stash of the stuff from the mail.
Oh,
Yeah,
you got the Caldera Lab stuff too, huh?
I did get it.
Dude, this is some great stuff, man. It's a 3-product regimen. You can go to their website and check the third-party results yourself. You don't have to believe Ray or I, but we've both been using it. It's great stuff. The 3-product regimen of the good, the base layer, and the clean slate. People who have used it are experiencing smoother and healthier looking skin. It's really great stuff. Go over to calderalab.com and use promo code DELUXE for 20% off. This is a great deal, Ray.
Yeah, look good, feel good, live good. That's what I always say.
Absolutely. calderalab.com. Use promo code DELUXE for 20% off of your entire order.
This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Deluxe Edition. I am your host, Casey Shearer, joined as always with the artist formerly known as the 10-cent Beer Night, L. Ray Sexton.
What's going on, Casey?
Not too much, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm having a great day.
Yeah, man. We just had another incredible interview.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the folks who we just talked to.
We just talked to Harry Walker, who is one of the most upbeat people I think I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, this guy is not only upbeat, but he is a member of the United States National Guard Special Forces. He's a Wildland Firefighter and a strongman, just to name a few. I mean, he's done some other things too that we talked about. Just an incredible human being. And we're going to get into the interview right after these quick plugs. We are a part of the Deluxe Edition Network. You can find all of the other great shows on the network at deluxeeditionnetwork.com. And I think the podcasts of the month are HILF and Barrel Aged Flicks. If this comes out in April, if this comes out in May, they are The Real Drunks and Horsing Around. Let's see. If you'd like to find any of our previous shows, if you really like this interview with Harry, go check out some of our other shows over at deluxeedition.show. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say. Here's our interview with Harry. All the links will be in the show notes. Check them out. Here it is.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, no problem, man. So before we get started here, I want to show a video to our viewers. We're not live or anything, so this is everything's edited. But I want to show how I got my introduction here to Harry Walker, and then we'll get into the interview. We're all going to be muted while this video plays. It's 1 minute long, so here it is.
Ready?
Jesus.
Come on! Yeah! Let's go! Yeah! Come on! Yeah! Yeah! 400, let's get it! Up! Get it up! Come on! Let's go! Let's go! Come on, Harry, show your boss! Rip it! Yeah!
Didn't quite get the 400 pounder, but holy shit, man.
Yeah, that was a really cool moment for me because I hadn't really had an opportunity to train stones for a while before that. So that was to get that. I think it was a 350, the one before that last one, and even to break the floor off the ground was like a big moment for me because like I said, hadn't really been training it, so it was it got me like really excited about stones again, which was cool.
So you say you couldn't train for that. How do you even train for something like that to pick up a 400-pound stone?
Well, yeah, I mean, Brett, the guy who kind of put that show on, would be the guy to ask because he's done some crazy weights with stones. But we had access to, or I did, stones about like 250 at my gym, but I didn't have like a platform or anything. And just because of my work schedule and my other competition schedule stuff, I wasn't really focusing on them. But if I did really want to train seriously for a heavy stone like that, I'd travel around a little bit to kind of get my hands on a heavier one. And if I couldn't do that, then I would just do a lot of like posterior chain work as much as I could to replicate some of that stuff. But they're so specific, trying to get heavy on those stones.
So that was my introduction to Harry Walker, and I was like, after that, that was at the Tallahassee Highland Games.
Yeah,
back in March. I think, and
I think it was like mid-February. Oh, it was because pretty shortly after that is when I went to Arnold Strength Expo in Columbus, Ohio to compete. And so, and I'd had that conversation with myself. I was like, oh, should I even, should I do this competition this close to the Arnold? And I'm really glad I did because it was kind of my introduction to a few more like really great people in the Florida strength scene. And that competition is almost the same as the one I'm going to go do in Norway in July. So I'm really glad. It was a really, really great experience.
I'm glad you came down to Tallahassee to do it too, man, because I probably wouldn't have ever heard about you otherwise. But after that, like just after that one day of competition, I was like, I want to have this guy on the podcast. I want to talk to him. And then after you agreed to do it, I started doing my research and I was like, holy shit, like this guy is not just a strongman. Like, dude, you have an incredible story, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to have done like a lot of interesting things, and I count myself very lucky and blessed. I don't know like which things you want me to go into because it a while, but yeah, I mean, in terms of like, I feel like the strength stuff I do has also been pretty married to kind of like the occupations I had. Before I joined the Marine Corps and I joined the military, I was going to school in Boston, and I worked pretty much as a bouncer in the entirety of college. And then I joined the Marine Corps, and I was doing a lot of the strongman stuff to kind of like support what I thought was good carryover to the job. I was in the infantry, and so like picking guys up, moving guys, picking up weird stuff. It was just important for me to be strong. And then stopped doing that and really started competing a lot more because I officially started competing in 2018. And I definitely like filled the void of getting out of the Marine Corps with like a ton of competing. Like I think I did 13 shows in 1 year, the year after I got out. So I was definitely filling like a gap there. And then I did some work in Africa for a little bit. I was doing some anti-poaching and conservation work, and making do with rocks and stuff out there as a way. So there's always been kind of this relationship between like the jobs I'm doing and like the strongman stuff, which has been really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning. You grew up in Maine, right?
Yeah, so sort of. I grew up the first 5 years of my life in New York. I was born in New York. And then when I was young, my parents split and I kind of bounced around Massachusetts a lot. And then in the summers, I would go up to Maine because my family had a place up there, and which was amazing to get to spend time up there out in nature all the time. And then high school and college in Boston. And then from there, just all over the place.
So what made you decide to join the Marine Corps then?
Um,
Like,
so
because you went to what did you go to college? You were headed through college, right? You went to college.
yeah, I
Oh,
I, I went to Boston University and I did the Marine ROTC there. So I studied health sciences at Boston University, and then I commissioned as an officer in the Marine Corps. But when I made the decision to join, I was in high school, and I was pretty influenced by my dad. My dad like grew up really poor in England, and he's a bit older. He's like 83 now. So to put in perspective, when he was really young, Birmingham, where he lived in England, was getting bombed by the Germans in World War II. So that was happening. So he came from like being kind of dirt poor and really, made a name for himself, just working hard. He became a really successful artist, and because of that, he was able to provide a pretty good life, I felt, for me. So I was just kind of looking at my life and then the things I wanted to do after high school, and I just kind of decided that I wanted some like hardship in my life, and I wanted to give back. A sense of service has always been really strong in me, and that's kind of when it started. So I kind of was looking around to see what would provide that outlet for me. I wanted something that was mentally challenging but physically challenging as well, and I settled on the Marine Corps because they do some great advertising about giving you kind of like a hard life and a hard experience, and so that's how I made that initial decision to join.
damn, man. Like, my dad was in the Marine Corps, and I never had any desire to join the Marine Corps. I was like, I want to be as far away from that as possible. So, like,
I,
more
I probably
power to you, man.
I probably would have been the same way if my dad was in the Marine Corps.
Well, thank you for your service, though, man. It's incredible. Like, so what does you say commissioned as a second lieutenant? What does that mean? Because we're not military guys.
Yeah. So in order to become an officer in the military, you have to have a degree of some sort. And so the difference between enlisting and commissioning is the degree is not a prerequisite for enlisting. And I almost did enlist, actually, and the only reason I didn't, because I went to the recruiter, and I left the recruiter, and I called my dad and I said, "Hey, I'm going to enlist in the Marine Corps," because it's kind of at like it's about 2009, so it's global war on terror was, it wasn't over yet, but there's still a lot going on, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I called my dad and told him I was going to do that, and he was a professor at Boston University. He basically told me I was stupid if I did that. I would get a free education since he was a professor there, and then I later went on to get the scholarship. But yeah, I was kind of I had my heart set on it until he told me to consider some other options. But yeah, commissioning just means you go in as an officer. So that's what I did, and it's definitely an interesting system because you're putting basically very young guys, kids in their young 20s, in charge of seasoned guys, seasoned men who have may or may not have a lot of experience. Definitely, you're paired up with like they're called a staff non-commissioned officer, a staff NCO, and these are Marines, guys who have had a lot of experience in the Marine Corps, and they are like there to be your almost like your enlisted mentor and advisor to kind of balance out this energetic young officer who shows up. You have like a good staff NCO who shows you kind of the do's and don'ts and how to interact, how to be in that leadership position, but also how to do it the right way.
It's amazing what you say about the young guys. Like, I travel for work every week, and a couple times I've been in and out of San Antonio, and I think that's where it is. And there's a big military base there, right?
Yeah, there is.
And it was around the holidays the one time, and the entire airport was filled with military. And I said to my girlfriend, like, I just can't believe how young some of these kids look. But, like, you think going back in history, that's always the way it's been, right?
Yeah, always. I mean, it's the decisions to do those kind of things are made basically by old men, and then the people who pay for it are these young guys who are extremely patriotic and hardworking. And every generation is always going to criticize like the younger generation, but at least when I was in, like, my Marines were tough as nails. I mean, some of them come from some really hard backgrounds, and I think that criticism is always going to exist. But the guys who join, especially combat arms and who want to go to the infantry, like, they're tough guys, they're tough kids. Doesn't matter, what generation they're from. There's always going to be kind of that warrior mentality. But yeah, they're young, they're crazy young.
So, like, when you were a kid, were you a thrill seeker? Like, because you wanted to go into the infantry, like you just said, like you.
No, I was like a sensitive kid, man. My dad was an artist, and I spent a lot of time like in the studio with him, like drawing and painting and reading. So I always felt like I was kind of like a softie, like a sensitive kid, and then I think I might have like taken that to heart or something, because I started playing rugby in high school, and I realized I needed to get bigger and stronger and more aggressive. So I started training like my freshman summer of high school, and then I started noticing like what the weight room could do for me performance wise playing rugby, because I played rugby in total for about 12 years, and it did everything for me. I mean, like, it made me confident. It like made me more outgoing. So yeah, like that's kind of when like the iron bug bit me, was in high school, and seeing not only what it could do for me athletically, but like just for my personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So how long did you spend in the Marine Corps then?
I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. I was stationed out in Hawaii, and we did 2 deployments out to the South Pacific. So working with partner forces in Japan and Korea. And then I got out in 2018, and then, did some other stuff. And now I'm back in the military, just on the guard side.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all that. So after the Marine Corps, you had a void, you said, in your life. So what took you to South Africa? Like, how did you get to South Africa for the vet paw, right? Anti-poaching unit.
Right. Yeah, that was a great experience. My friend Pete from the Marine Corps, he had a connection with vet paw, and I was fresh out of the Marine Corps, and I was kind of really figuring out what I wanted to do. And he was posting all these crazy pictures and videos on his Instagram, with all these African animals, and like it seemed like he was doing all this great stuff. And just on a whim, I kind of shot a message. I was like, "What are you doing right now? Where are you? Like, what's going on?" And because I was like, because I'm super interested. How do I do it? And just as like fate would have it, they were short staffed at that time, and usually they at that time they were making their guys go through like a screener and all this good stuff. And because Pete and I had been in the same unit, he was like, "Yeah, man, you're good. I can personally vouch for you. There's a full moon coming up, which is like a really dangerous time for the rhino, because it provides a lot of visibility at night for poachers." He's like, "We're short on guys. Can you be out here in like," he's like, "Can you be out here in 2 weeks?" So with 2-week notice, I was like, "Yeah, I'll be there. Tell me, what I need to pack, and how long do you need me out for?" And he's like, like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll be there. Just tell me what to do." So I showed up, and then that initial one I went for about 6-7 weeks, and then came back for a little bit, and then I went out for 3 months. And I had a great time out there working with all the guys on the team level and the locals, and just learning a ton. It was a great experience.
So when you did you think that you were going to like physically like get into like firefights with dudes and shit? Like,
yeah, that's what I was expecting. And that's what I mentally prepared for. And I was totally ready and willing to do all that. And it wasn't as kinetic as I thought it was going to be. It ended up being a lot more on like the on conservation side. So like taking care of the animals, making sure the security perimeter was all set. Yeah, but in my mind, I was like fully engaged to go out and get after and get into firefights with poachers and all that.
So did you ever, I mean, you were there for quite a while. Did you ever encounter anything like that or?
Yeah, so there was, it was actually separate from vet paw. I went kind of on my own accord to do some training with, his name's Colin Patrick, and he's kind of like the leading authority in anti-poaching out in South Africa and really over that part of Africa. And he was running a man tracking course. So I went out and I got certified to be a man tracker, which is a funny title, but I did this training with him, and he was working on a reserve out there, and then there was a neighboring reserve, and I met a friend who was working there who was the head of the anti-poaching unit there, and he basically invited me to stay, for about a week before I went off to one of the vet paw reserves I was working at. And while I was there, sure enough, there was a poaching incursion. His guys had been doing a patrol, and they found, it's called spoor, where it's like tracks of poachers, encroaching into the reserve. This is like midnight or something, and yeah, like alarm goes up, and we all activated. I was in one of the chase vehicles for a little bit, and then I'm on like one of the foot units, and we were checking, where the tracks were, where the spoor was. And it turns out we were able to, we didn't actually get the guys that night, but after looking at the tracks, what happens is we realized they heard us and they saw us. So they had to divert and leave the property. So, thankfully it meant that a rhino didn't get poached, that night, which was great. But, sadly on that same reserve, later on, my friend, he sent me some pictures and videos, and, a couple rhinos did get hit on his reserve, because it's a constant battle out there. And honestly, all the advantages are, like the poachers have all the advantages in terms of like they choose where they go, when they go, and they're also extremely like skilled and proficient. These guys are, they're locals, they're indigenous to the area or areas very similar. There's been cases where it's guys who have actually maybe worked on the reserve before, so they kind of know where the animals congregate or whatever it is. And they're professional criminals. It's not just it's not like amateur criminal stuff. There's levels of it, but they're very skilled, and they know what they're doing. So it can be it's a very difficult problem, for reserve owners out there and for the national parks.
So when you say a reserve too, you're not talking about like a city block. These are, they're huge areas, right?
Yeah, hundreds of acres, thousands.
Yeah.
Of acres.
So how big are these units? There can't be enough men to cover that entire area.
No, it's completely short-staffed, and to either the amount of manpower or technology cost that it would take to fully like surveil or survey, whatever the word is, those areas would be incredible. So the system that a lot of them have in place is, it'll be fenced, and then there will, along those fenced areas or somewhere on the entire perimeter, they'll basically have graded roads, and depending on in the area where it is, it's usually pretty kind of like soft, sandy in those parts of South Africa. It's very easy to tell if there's been tracks or prints, right? And so you'll have periodic patrols of these areas, either foot or mobile, where you're kind of checking for detection. So in a way, it's like a rudimentary surveillance system, but it's also very effective, to a point, depending on how effective the roads are. But, there's also poachers who are incredibly intelligent at ways to evade those kind of things. But yeah, it's a difficult problem set for sure.
Are they like taking the entire rhino out of there, or just like the horns for the most part? Because that seems like incredibly difficult to get a rhino off the reservation without being detected.
Yeah, no, you're correct. It's just the horn, and that's one of the terrible parts about it is they'll shoot the rhino. Sometimes the rhino won't even be completely dead, and they'll cut the horn, or actually they'll cut in to get as much of the horn as they can, which is awful. So they're butchering this animal, and then they're not that I would want them to use it anyway, but it's not like other things where someone's using every part of the animal. They're only butchering it for this one part. And the rhino horn it's keratin, so it's the same thing as what our fingernails are made out of. So it's completely useless in any medicinal sense. The reason that they're doing this, same thing with the elephant ivory, is it's extremely popular in Asia for like traditional remedies. It's supposed to be an aphrodisiac. It's supposed to be used as like erectile dysfunction medicine, like all these things. It's not actually doing. It's all kind of like superstition. So the market for it all gets exported illegally out of Mozambique to mostly China. So it's a black market trade, and it's awful because it doesn't actually do anything. It's purely fueled by greed and superstition, and a lot of that money, because they're professional criminals, a lot of it can actually go into funding terrorism and terrorist groups out there. So it's kind of a double whammy.
Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, it's
I didn't even think of that. Like, I didn't even think about what Ray said about them just taking that. So that's horrible, man.
Yeah, it's awful when you actually see. I mean, if you just Google search, it's awful to actually see like the aftermath of a rhino being poached. Because sometimes they'll be pregnant too, and then obviously the calf dies as well. And it's just these rhinos, they're usually laying down or laying on their side, and their whole face has been cut apart. Sometimes sometimes they're still alive. I actually think a couple have been saved, in the sense that like their horns were cut off and they were able to save the rhino's life, but that's really rare. But yeah, they're just being butchered for no reason. It's an awful thing. That's why it feels good to be out there and helping protect them. And the real guys out there doing it are the South African natives themselves, like my friend and his anti-poaching unit. Because for me and for a lot of guys who get to go out once or twice, it's great. And it is like, I hope to go back someday and do it more. But those guys that's their life. They're living out there and they're doing it every day and for years on end. So they're so invested, and they get these small wins, but it's like an eternal kind of struggle against these people. So it's tough.
So when you're out there you said you were there for 3 months at one point, right?
Yeah.
Like what is the living situation like? Are you sleeping in like a separate tent every night, or is there like
No.
was it similar to like your military?
Yeah, so we had like a team house, and it honestly, some of the places I stayed over there have been nicer than some of the apartments I've had in the United States. Yeah, especially because like the scenery and like just the environment. But no, by no means was I like roughing it. Really, like I expected it to be 100%. I thought I was going to be living out of like a sleeping bag and a tent. And when I got there, I was very pleasantly surprised. Not to say that there weren't issues. I mean, like sometimes like electricity or water we wouldn't have, it would just shut off, whatever. But my experience in the military like more than prepared me for having to do stuff out there, which was great.
Yeah. A couple more questions about that before we move on to the rest of the crazy shit that you've done.
Yeah.
So are they only, what else are they poaching, or what are they, strictly rhinos, or?
So it's mostly rhino and elephant, and then there's something else. It's called like game poaching or game meat poaching, and that's basically, usually like the antelope subspecies that are out there, because there's a lot of those kind of things on game reserves and otherwise national park. And that's kind of where the criminal element can range a lot, in the sense that that could be being done by very poor villagers who live in the local area, and they're trying to get some food for the family, or it could be a little bit better criminals who are just doing it so they can sell at like the local market. So game meat poaching it's still illegal. I think the necessity of it varies a lot. There's some people who are just criminals who are just doing it to make a business out of it, and then there's nothing to say that it also can't be someone who doesn't have the economic means to get food. So in my mind, like, and I could be totally off base on this because I also don't live in South Africa, so my exposure is very different. But in my mind, like, that stuff wasn't as bad as the poaching for rhino and elephant.
Sure. So you mentioned man tracking.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, man, because I listened to another podcast that you were on, one of your military buddies, and like this is crazy shit. The man tracking, and like the possibly confronting an elephant in the middle of the night on the trail, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, the man tracking part for me was pretty like straightforward and easy, actually, because a lot of it involved like small unit tactics and how to work within a group while you're on tracks. But the steepest learning curve that I have when I got out there was learning how to read and interact with the wildlife. And so that's why this guy Colin Patrick is such an amazing guy, because he's been on, it's called hot tracks when you're in active pursuit of someone. So he uses a tracking dog. They use Malinois, which are great working dogs. But he's been in several situations where they're on hot tracks. They, in the middle of the night, and because they're native to the area, they understand so well. They're in a situation where they're coming across a dangerous animal, be it an elephant, be it the Cape buffalo, are extremely dangerous. And then depending on what type of animal it is, having to make the decision, like, okay, am I gonna like confront and like try and like scare this animal or move this animal out of my way, or do I have to take the time to like come off the track and like circumnavigate around this issue? So that's where guys like me were kind of in the dark, and I had to learn a lot of stuff really quickly. So it wasn't a liability, because how am I gonna I'm no use to getting after a poacher if I find myself interacting with an animal I don't know how to interact with. So that's where I think, if anyone's interested in doing any of this stuff, that's the thing you got to realize. It's no matter what your military background is, you're going to have to learn a tremendous amount of knowledge about like the local terrain and the animals and how to, interact with them. Being able to read an elephant's mock charge versus a real charge. Like, an elephant's going to put its ears out real big if it wants to intimidate you and scare you. But the moment it puts those back and puts its head down and comes at you, like it's gonna kill you. You know what I mean? So there's videos you can watch of elements, like the guides in the Kruger, just the walking guides who like tour people around. They're amazing, because you'll see these massive elephants come out, and they're right in front of them, like 20 feet away, and the person just makes themselves look as big as they can. They'll yell and like they'll scare an elephant away, and they stand stock still, while this thing's coming at them. So that's like incredible to me. And it's just because they know. Yeah, it's because they know how to read the animals, and they've received some excellent training. they do carry a rifle for if they do have to defend themselves with a guest, but they receive so much excellent training, so they know how to do all that stuff. And I was, completely ignorant to all that my first time going out, and I very quickly realized I had to take my education in my own hands if I wanted to be effective out there.
Did you ever encounter anything like that? Like anything like a scary animal like that?
Uh, there's a couple angry elephants on one of the reserves I worked on. One was a broken tusk, and he was known for like chasing down vehicles. A lot of so we did a lot of mounted operations, meaning we would use the vehicles pretty heavily, and then we would dismount to go on kind of walking patrols of perimeter areas or night patrols. But you always had in mind like how far away you were from a vehicle, and then if I was walking somewhere, because the most dangerous things are probably like Cape buffalo, black rhino, elephant, and so especially for the Cape buffalo and the rhino, I would always have my eyes out for like a tree or something that I the next piece of terrain I could get to and get up if I needed to. Elephant, it's not going to help you too much, but you can usually hear them from like a pretty good distance away. And then, there's like a night patrol we went on one time, and when we were walking back on our tracks, we saw fresh leopard tracks, which means one was stalking us. And they're ambush predators too. So that was like kind of a wake up call, because you really do realize how like insignificant you are and how like low on the food chain you really are when you're out there with those animals. And thankfully mankind invented firearms, so we kind of get but I can only imagine what it was like for our species before we had the advantage of all that stuff.
Now I'm is like a lot of this in the middle of the night too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, fuck that, man. You're dude.
Yeah,
Amazing, man.
There's a saying that we have in like different parts of the military, and it's always like, we own the night. And we did not own the night out there with those animals at all.
Oh man, that's intense shit, man. So like thinking about it, it's got to be even harder for the units on these reserves, because there are so many different animals that the people are trying to come in and poach too. Because there's on the places that these units that you were working for, they're all protected reserves, right? There's no legal hunting, right?
Right. That's correct. So the only legal hunting you can do on those is if because game reserves are essentially they're incredibly important to the ecosystem, because they balance and they preserve all these keystone species. But a game preserve allows people to come onto it and hunt some of the animals. They don't allow the hunting of like the rhino or the elephant or any of that stuff. And that's actually it's one of the major pieces of the South African economy, because almost all of the land out there is privatized, except for I think like the national park. It's a little bit different how that's done, and there's no hunting on the national parks. The Kruger is what it's called. So no, there's no illegal hunting. It's not like in America where there's areas of public land where anyone can just go and hunt. That doesn't really exist in South Africa. So it's the whole ecological setup is very different, and the whole hunting setup is very different than what we have in America.
When they are coming on to these preserves to hunt legally, they're paid hunts, right? They're coming in and paying to. Now, so that's another thing. Will poachers pose as people and bring other people on to like say that they're doing a legal hunt?
No, there's kind of like, at least to my understanding, I haven't ever been in a situation where I didn't work for those reserves in that regard. I was just security. But no, there's a pretty intense like vetting process, and there's an initial exchange of money and like all of these things. And the poachers, they're not able to present themselves in that legitimate of a way.
Okay. Man, amazing. Like I said, fuck that, but like, dude, like more power to you, man, because that it's incredible shit what they're doing over there.
It's a really cool experience. I think if anyone, obviously Vet Paw is the organization I worked through, but there's a lot of other ones out there. Anyone who hears this, if you're a military veteran or otherwise, if you're interested in doing it, you can just privately message me and we can talk about it.
Awesome. So you leave South Africa and you come back, and you're going to have to explain this because I don't know what this means. Is it decommissioned your status in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, I resigned my commission.
So what does that mean?
That means, and this is not like a common thing. And this was, so I mean, I left the Marine Corps for a few reasons, but one of the reasons being, so the Special Operations branch of the Marine Corps is called MARSOC, and to my understanding at the time, I would not have been able to resign my commission and join MARSOC. I also wasn't interested in doing so as a captain, which I got out at, because you get like 2 years operational max as a team leader, as like an officer on the team. And, I felt like I'd already kind of played that game with the Marine Corps. Like I was in for 4 years, and then my career progression as an officer, it was going to, in my opinion, take me away from the things that I cared about, which was being at the small unit level, having Marines, staying tactical and operational.
So when sorry to cut you off, but when you say having Marines, like you were in charge of like 40 guys, right?
Yeah, I was a rifle platoon commander and then a weapons platoon commander, and in each platoon I had about 40 guys. So I was the leader, or the officer, and then I also had a platoon sergeant, and then I had a rifle platoon. I had 3 squad leaders, and my weapons platoon I had 3 section leaders. So that's kind of how that works.
So you leave the Marine Corps, decommission your status, and you join the Army National Guard.
Yep.
So you can become a special forces, right?
That's right. And I had made that decision actually after my first deployment in the Marine Corps, just kind of like seeing what the Marine Corps was doing and what other opportunities were out there. And I'd done a ton of research, and I'd talked to a lot of people to kind of see what the best opportunities were. And that's honestly, like, National Guard Special Forces it's very commonly referred to as like the Army's best kept secret, because it enables you to be a special forces operator and have a civilian career at the same time, which is, it is really difficult to balance both those things, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And it provides a lot more flexibility, which was something that was appealing to me. I love the Marine Corps, but the Marine Corps is not very flexible as an active duty Marine. And so, that was among some of the factors that made me make that choice. And I felt like I had played the timing game in the Marine Corps, and I didn't want to be constricted by a timeline again. And so that's why I chose to enlist. And it's been a great decision. I'm extremely happy with it. I'm having a great time.
It's a long process, because the podcast that I listened to that you were on, I think was like 2020, and you're still going through the process of everything, right?
So I went through, I'm done with all my training. So I'm officially operational. I'm on a team now. But all in all, the process took about, for me, and it was a pretty quick process for me. But all in all, I'd say it was about 14, 15 months of training. And that's just because, things like lined up pretty quickly. It can take guys up to 2 years, if not a little bit more, depending on the job they get and other things. If they have to repeat anything, if they like fail and recycle and have to do something again. I was fortunate enough to have passed everything the first time and gone straight through. So
was it, you said it was a little quicker for you? Was that because you didn't have, like, you weren't working another job, or like you only had that to focus on, or?
No, actually, so I'm just counting training time from when I started the process to when I actually finished. Was like I hit some bumps. One being that the state, which has the initial like screener to be accepted to the unit, which would then send you to the official screener. So there's like a pre-screener to the screener. They only ran that event twice a year, and so I was getting ready, and I injured my foot, which is obviously extremely important because there's tons of running and rucking, like a heavy pack on your back. So I had to make this really hard decision for me because, I got out of the Marine Corps knowing I was going to do this, and I had this injury, and that means I have to wait another 6 months before I can try out. So, but I told myself, I was like, hey, you're 100% invested in this. Like, you need to show up with your best performance. So I decided to delay it. Actually, I went to South Africa to work during one of those times, and while I was out there, I was like running and rucking like through all these reserves with all these dangerous animals, like super aware whenever I was running. But then I came back. I took that screener. I got selected to go to the training team, which your sole job in the training team is to get ready for, it's called SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection. So my only job was really just to work out and be ready, which I did. And that I hit a little hiccup there because I was supposed to, like attach to my new unit. Then the like electronic administrative system of the Army like lost me for like 3 months. So I didn't exist, and I was calling him every week, and I was like, hey, I'm a real person. I swear I exist. I'm still waiting to get attached here. Which was rough for me because, like, now this thing, which I thought was going to happen really quickly, is now at like 9+ months, you know what I mean? And I'm still waiting. I mean, small steps, I was getting there, but it was, really frustrating for me. So that finally went through. And then I had like an official date to go down to SFAS. And then this is like right around the time COVID starts happening. So I get told like, hey, your date's been canceled. Like, we don't know what's going on with this COVID stuff. Like, you're just going to have to wait and see what happens, and I'd been like bouncing around, like around the world, didn't have like a real job. I'd been working in like Boston for a little bit at bars. And then I got back from Africa, and I was like, I can't be around people. Like, I'd just been, living out in the bush and like, with, these great experiences. And I come back to the concrete jungle. I'm like, oh, F this. I was like, this is terrible. So that's when I moved, back up to Maine. And I just wanted to be outside and kind of be alone and focusing on, training and getting ready. So yeah, I get told like that COVID's kind of messed things up and you're just gonna have to wait. And I'm like, damn, here I am, like living up in the woods. Like, I had Warhorse going on. So I was, I had some income, but like, I was really starting to like beat myself up. I was like, what are you doing, man? Like, you said you're going to do this thing. It's not happening. So at that time, I had been doing some research because one of my Marines had gotten out and he became a wildland firefighter out west. And so I had looked up and researched all the military veteran wildland fire crews, and I shot them all an email. All the ones for the Bureau of Land Management, I shot them all an email. It was like 12 or 13 crews. And Vegas Valley veterans called me back, just did a phone interview with me, and they offered me a job. Fire season starts like in May. So I think this was about maybe this was about like February or March, and I accepted. And then the next day, the Army called me, and they said, "Hey, we got you a date. for special force assessment selection. And they're like, they didn't know this, but they're like, it's 2 weeks after you start that fire job. You just accepted yesterday. So I'm like, great, thank you so much. I'll be there. And so I'll be ready, because this is the thing I've been working towards for so long. So I immediately call my new boss up, my fire boss, and I was like, hey, I can be there for the first 2 weeks, which is criticals, which is when you do all your training and get your red card, which is like a certification. I was like, I can be there for criticals, and then I have to leave for like 6 weeks. Is that okay? And my boss was like, yeah, that's fine. I understand, out of your control. He's like, you just have to promise that you're going to come back. Like, you're not just going to go out there and, do whatever. Like, I need your promise. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I promise. So I went out there for fire season, and it actually worked out really well, because, Vegas Valley, really good crew, really in shape. And so I was out there, running around in the hot ass desert and doing some really brutal hikes. And it actually helped me drop a little bit of weight. Not that I was fat, but drop a little bit like muscle weight, and like cut my run times and my hike times down, which was perfect. Because like 2 weeks later, I leave, I show up to SFAS, and like my run times, I'm just cruising. So and then I attended selection. I was there for about 6 weeks, which is usually a little longer than usual, but because of COVID, like we had to do a little bit extra time on the front end and the back end. Thankfully, we didn't have to wear masks the whole time, but there's a couple like runs in the beginning. Wow, it was like raining, and I was just like eating that mask. But,
so that was going to be one of my questions. The military did not shut down during COVID, right? They were still accepting people, right?
The military was doing some really weird stuff during COVID. Like they were like locking people in their barracks rooms and like hand delivering food to them. There's across the branches, there's a lot of nonsense going on, but no, there was only a brief period where they weren't running those selections, and then pretty quickly they started them up again, because I mean, hey, the military needs trained soldiers and Marines and whatever, so they'll adapt.
Yeah, especially the National Guard, which you were signing up for, right? Like,
yep.
To protect our country. I know you had to sign an NDA for the special forces, like all the training and stuff, but now that you've made it, are you allowed to talk about any of the training that went on at all?
I can talk about certain parts of it. I mean, there is a lot of like pretty readily available information online. What I won't do is because there's certain parts of it that like people just need to go, if they're thinking of doing it, they need to go and experience it for themselves. And so I don't want to do a disservice by like giving an unfair advantage to anyone by giving them some information. But most of it is at SFAS is pretty straightforward. I mean, there's like 3 phases. There's a gate week, a land navigation week, and a team week. And gate week is basically all your graded physical events. I can't tell people how it also changes. Like no class is the same. It's a really well run screener. It's like one of the more professional things I've done in my military career in terms of like a selection process. So even if I were to give the numbers of the distances and stuff I did, it wouldn't matter because it wouldn't be the same for someone going. Everything's variable and it changes, which is great. But yeah, then there's like land navigation, which is straightforward. Doesn't matter. I can't draw out the map, nor would I want to. Just things you're gonna have to learn about it when you get down there. And then team week, I love team week. Team week, it's like strongman marathon, man. You'll hear some people, they have horror stories about team week because maybe they just didn't have a strong team, or they had a cadre member who wasn't so nice. But I felt like it was like my bread and butter. It was you show up and you're in a team of guys, and you got your rucks on, and you're basically given a collection of items, very heavy items, and things that you usually have to like strap together or build in some way, shape, or form, and then you got to move that thing or carry that for an unknown distance for an unknown amount of time, and you're gonna be doing that for like 4 days. So just have fun. It pays to be a winner. That's all I'll say. Like, the sooner you're done, maybe you'll be the first team. Maybe you get, 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And if you're the last team, maybe you get no sleep, But it's a good time, and it's a good, I had a great time down there. It's a good selection process. And yeah, if anyone is interested in some more information about just kind of that whole journey or pathway, I'd be more than happy to talk about it.
Awesome, man. So let's talk about the wildland, the firefighting a little bit. So
Yeah.
that, like, you called the guy, you said, I'll be there. Then you get told that you have to be at this training. And you say you can be there for the first 2 weeks, but then you have to take 6 weeks off. So this isn't like when I think of a firefighter, I think of like a volunteer firefighter. Like, you're hired for a job, right? Like, this isn't a volunteer gig, right?
No, this is, yeah. So like, so regular firefighters, municipal firefighters, or city firefighters, they're the guys who put on the suits and the oxygen tanks, and they save cats and they save babies and they go into the buildings and all that. Real firefighters, right? So we have a joke about them being like real firefighters. They get all the water, all that. Wildland firefighters. So yeah, we like hike up a mountain to get to the fire, and then we fight it with chainsaws and hand tools. But it's a great job. I actually I really highly suggest it for veterans, for guys getting out and transitioning out of the military. That's actually, our crew is all military veterans, and it's really such like an amazing community, an amazing place. But yeah, it's hard. It's seasonal. Most of the guys who do it are seasonal employees, so they'll come out. They'll do it for 6 months. Typically, fire season is 6 months. It's from May to October for the most part, give or take a month, depending on the crew. And then, with the other half of the year, they might have another job. They might use their money from fire season to go travel the world. You get a really like interesting mix of personalities. A lot of really like adventurous, kind of independent, free spirit guys doing wildland fire. And then if you do, well in your first year or two, you can get a permanent position depending on the crew. And there's different types of wildland firefighters. So I'm on a hand crew, which is like, you can think about it as like the infantry of like wildland fire. Like, you go out, you fight the fire with chainsaws and hand tools, and you're digging line, digging into the earth. And then there's engines. So those are the guys who driving the vehicles around. They have water, different types and capabilities. There's hell attack. So those are guys who are both flying and servicing helicopters, which are dropping water or supplies out to the crews. There's hotshot crews, which they're like hand crews, but they have some more qualifications. So they actually basically respond faster, and they can do a little bit more. I'd say they're like the Ranger Regiment of fire. And then you have smoke jumpers. Those are like special forces of fire. Like, those are the guys who get qualified to go up in a plane, and then they jump out of it and they like parachute into very low access areas, and then they go and fight the fire. They're usually a lot more independent, and they're badass. One of my friends actually a smoke jumper, and he's got a crazy story about his first jump. A guy's chute almost didn't deploy, so he didn't think he was gonna have to go, and then they basically kicked him out, and then he landed. There's grizzly bears on the landing zone because they're in Alaska. Yeah, those guys are awesome. And
holy shit! Now, other than their chainsaws and the tools that are they carrying any weapons?
Sometimes, yeah. I've actually heard some of the crews out in Alaska that they'll jump with like a high caliber pistol or like a shotgun, just for like bear deterrence. Yeah, because they're no joke out there.
Damn. And are they mostly military guys also?
It's a mix. I mean, our crew is unique because it's a veteran crew, but I think the composition as a whole of Wildland Firefighters, they're mostly civilians. I will say that I think people coming from a wildland fire background have a very high probability of success. Depending on the personality type, they might, if they like authority or not, I think they do well in the military. Because honestly, there was times in my special forces training where I would remember and look to some of my experiences from my first fire season as being like, hey, like not even the Marine Corps. I'd be like, hey, you had that one day in fire which was nuts, physically, and like you can do this, you can do this all day. So it's and sometimes that surprises people when I say that some of the physically most challenging times of my life have actually been from like wildland fire, not even from any of my military experiences.
Well, when you do any research about the dangerous jobs in America, like one of the number one dangerous jobs in America is like logging,
Oh yeah,
cutting trees down. And then you're not only doing that, but you're also fighting fucking fires as well. Like,
yeah. I mean, that's one of the most dangerous things for wildland firefighters is hazard trees or dangerous trees. Those things are no joke. And because so think about like regular trees, come green trees that are healthy, or even if they're dead, that's a certain problem set. And now add to that, a tree that's been weakened by fire or has all these other kind of like trees around it. Someone's got to go in and basically cut that tree or get rid of it so it's not a hazard to the other firefighters, who are working in around it or transiting that area. So, the complexity of some of those trees is, extreme, and seeing the skill of some of like, either the professional fellers or some of the wildland firefighters who have higher qualifications. The way they get after that stuff is super impressive.
dude, like when you get up in the morning, how do you find the motivation to we at the video that we showed in the beginning of the podcast here,
Yeah.
like you always have a smile on your face, like, and you've been through some of the craziest shit that we've ever talked about on this podcast. Like what is your motivation, man?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really, really enjoy like hardship and finding new ways to challenge myself. So much so that like sometimes it's probably a problem in terms of like just like my personal life, because I've found that when I accomplish something, my mind immediately is like, okay, well, what's the next thing? Like, what's the next hardest thing, or what's another hard thing I can do? And I think there's a lot of merit in that, because it's not resting on your laurels. And I think you have to have that characteristic in a lot of the communities I'm involved in, especially wildland firefighting and special forces. Because there's definitely been moments where you call it like imposter syndrome. You're around so many excellent people, so many motivated people, and so many incredible people. Like, I can't tell you how many of these people I'm surrounded with, just in various aspects of my life. And sometimes you have these moments where you're like, oh, they're gonna find out. They're gonna find out that like I'm not as smart or strong or talented, or so it's like I gotta keep figuring out ways to make sure I'm not the weak link, or I'm not that I'm good enough to be here, kind of thing. So
there are things you can challenge yourself with that are not a risk to your life, like maybe learn a language or something.
You're absolutely right. And I think when my body breaks down enough, I'm really gonna have to look into more of those. But no, I do completely agree. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've been digging into that stuff a lot more recently, and in the sense of just within like my own mind, and really examining how I approach situations and why I approach them the way I do. So kind of like, and the first time I realized that some of the hardest things that I could do were really like in my own mind was a huge breakthrough and um, very satisfying for me. So now that is a huge part of my life as well. Like while I do undertake a lot of these physical challenges, I'm finding that the mental challenges are the most rewarding and challenging. And so I'm really enjoying that journey as well.
So you mentioned Warhorse.
Yeah.
So that's why I mentioned the motivation thing, because you're motivating people now also since 2020. You founded Warhorse Athletics, a coaching community committed to the physical and mentally preparing tactical athletes for the rigors of their profession. So
Right.
is this only, military, police, firefighters, or are civilians also allowed to join?
Yeah, civilians are absolutely allowed to join. I have a lot of clients who are civilians, and they just, they want to challenge themselves. They want to become better versions of themselves. I have a lot of athletes who compete in strongman, and then I would say just regular people, quote unquote regular people, who are they're not regular. They're incredible. Who just they want to train in a very intense way, or usually what it actually evolves into is they actually have some pretty intense goals that maybe were just like a possibility in their mind at first, and then they start training, and those things kind of come out. They're like, actually, I think I want to do this. So that's been really satisfying to see a lot of my athletes achieve some of these things. So that's really cool for me. And I love helping people. I especially love helping people, police, fire, military, because for me, I really feel like I'm giving back to the communities I care so much about. Like if I'm able to enable someone to be a more in shape law enforcement officer or wildland firefighter, or military member, I feel like that effect compounds, and the scope of that extends just beyond me and that person. It goes into like professions where people's lives are depending on each other. So for me, it's incredibly important that those people take their physical and their mental health seriously, so they can any job that you sign a contract saying I'm now in charge of the public safety or the safety of my brothers and sisters, like you don't get to be selfish anymore. I'm sorry. Like you signed that away when you joined that job. Like your responsibility is so much greater than yourself now. So you owe it to all those people around you and all those people who depend on you to really do everything you can to prepare yourself for those worst days. I hope they don't come, but when they do, I want people to be ready.
Sure. That's awesome, man. So you started this was 2020. You started this company during COVID?
I did.
Right? So what was that like?
It was
like, and for everyone that it's not you don't actually have a physical gym where people can come, right? It's all an online
That's right.
community, right?
It's all remote, yeah. And it was funny because I actually started it just before COVID started getting really serious, and then a lot of the content that I was producing was just kind of stuff that I thought was cool, and it was a lot of like ways to train and exercise without having a gym or any of these things. And then COVID happened, and it in my opinion, like as small as it is, it kind of like blew up because people are now seeing like, oh, what Harry's talking about is valid, because you don't need a weight room to train, or there's all these other options. And then because of the remote nature of it, it means you don't have to work with me one-on-one. I can kind of just give you your programming and your ideas for stuff. So it doesn't feel good to say, like, but yeah, COVID was good for Warhorse. You know what I mean?
Because everything that's how this podcast got started, out of COVID. Like we didn't have anything else to do. We were like, I had people to interview from a previous podcast that fell apart because of COVID. So that's how this got started. Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, I'm glad yours evolved into what it did, because otherwise we wouldn't have met each other. So sometimes bad things become good things.
Right. Yeah. So like talk a little more about Warhorse. Is it different for every single, like, do you have a different like regimen or whatever you call it for every single person, or is it like the same
It's
basic stuff for
everyone. So it's customized. So it means I get in contact with an athlete, and then I send out basically like it's a consultation form, and it's got 20 something questions on there, just like various information I need, and then I get that. We talk some more, but it's completely different to every person's goals or current capabilities. Their the appeal why a lot of people come to me is because they have they have hard training conditions. Either they're deployed or they've got a job like Wildland Fire. They don't have a stable place they can train. It's always changing. And because of my experiences, I understand that, and I know how to facilitate something for them where they can continue to make progress despite very challenging conditions with sleep, with training, with nutrition, like all these things. So yeah, fully individualized for each person, and then within those areas, I mean, obviously, like a pre-fire season progression, from client to client is going to look more similar than like a pre-strongman competition, workup, or like what I have for a law enforcement officer, and even within those jobs, there's a ton of variation. Like I've got some law enforcement guys who they're correctional officers. So for them, it's a lot, it's really important to be like big, strong, explosive, but also look physically intimidating, because
sure
it's almost similar to, in a sense, what you'd want to train for as like a bouncer. Because while it's very important for me to be like a proficient fighter and physically dominant, like if I can look a certain way and people not want to cause problems just because I look a certain way, like that's great. Like the idea is we want to avoid conflict altogether, and if it does happen, we're going to make sure you're the one who's on top, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that consideration, for example, like completely different for a Wildland Firefighter, like that guy doesn't want to be huge, because hiking up those mountains, for me, like when I show up a little heavier, like muscular, it hurts a little bit for the first few weeks till I drop some weight. So, there's different considerations for everyone. And everyone, it's someone who says like, oh yeah, the tactical community gets like a cookie cutter thing. It's like, no, because there's so many different considerations within the tactical jobs. So it is really important that I do that, sit down with people and kind of get those specific life conditions, whatever they are.
I kind of like that corrections officer thing, because it reminded me of your elephant story where you're teaching them to throw the ears up.
Sure enough. Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah, there was this. We used to watch Live PD every Friday and Saturday night when I was on, and I forget where he was from, but there was this one like just giant cop. Like his arms were just like huge, and it's like if anyone is dumb enough to fuck with that guy just based on his looks alone, like they're an idiot.
I don't think Ronnie Coleman had like a single case of violence against him when he was a cop, because people just saw him showing up. They're like, yeah, no.
So I just have a few more questions here. What got you into the strongman stuff then? Like the competitions and stuff like that, like, and getting like yoked.
Yeah. So in terms of like some of the movements themselves, when I was in high school, he's still got an Instagram page now. He's a really good coach. His name's Zach Evanesh. And when I was just kind of like looking at ways I wanted to train, he had a lot of really cool stuff about, how to train like old school strength athletes and stuff that you could like do outside, and stuff with odd objects, like, kegs and like ropes and sandbags before they had like companies which made like nice strongman sandbags. There's, people made their own with like a military duffel bag and whatever. So I started reading about a bunch of that, and it was like hardcore training, which really appealed to me. And then I found out that it had really good carryover for like some of the tactical stuff. So I always kind of tried to incorporate some of that stuff really since like the end of high school. And then when I was in Hawaii, because I was stationed in Hawaii, I had done powerlifting for a little bit. I wasn't really good at it. I was pretty bad at it, actually. In this gym in Honolulu called Mana Barbell. If anyone's ever on Oahu, go check them out. They're awesome. I went by, I'd lifted there a few times, and I asked the owner of the gym, because there was like a fit expo going on. I was like, hey, do you guys have any more spots in the powerlifting competition? And he said, no, actually, we just got filled up, but there's some openings in the strongman that you should look at. And I was kind of like, well, I've never competed before. I've done some stuff, but, I don't really know what to do. And he said, yeah, that's fine. Every Sunday, there's like a group that gets together here at Mana Barbell, the strongman group. He's like, you should stop by and just kind of, pick their brains and see what you can do. So I stopped by on Sunday, and some of the largest and the nicest people I've ever met were all there training. They're all my friends, like to this day. And I started training with them. And so they go to this competition in Oregon every year called Oregon Feats of Strength. And they're like, yeah, Harry, you should compete with us, come do it. And so I was gearing up for that competition, and then our deployment got shifted like a month earlier, so I wasn't able to make it. But I kept training strongman while I was deployed. Whatever, I got back, and then I finally did go with that group. At first, I was going to enter as an amateur, and then they said, Harry, you're too strong to compete as an amateur. Like, you have to compete in the open. Which to me, I was nervous, because I was like, oh. Yeah. I'm gonna get my ass kicked. But I won, and I qualified for nationals, like my first competition, which like then spurred me to compete like a madman, because I wanted to get experience so I could show up and not make like a fool out of myself. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started competing. And
so what, I have to stop you. What is the difference between powerlifting and strongman? Like, is a power lifter, are they only lifting like barbells and weights?
Yes. Yeah. So powerlift consists of 3 movements, and in sequential order of the way they do it at the competition. It's always squat, bench, deadlift, and they get 3 attempts on each lift to lift the most amount of weight. And there's weight classes and all this good stuff. And it's a cool sport. I think there's phenomenally strong athletes who do it. I wasn't that great at it for whatever reason. It just seemed like moving weird stuff around worked out better for me. I think it's because I had like a decent athletic background with rugby, and I just I've like really have some good aggression and intensity, which seems to translate pretty well into some of the strongman stuff. But yeah, strongman is, every competition's different, and there's like literally you could do probably hundreds of different variations of a lot of the events. So for me, like the variety is amazing. For me, powerlifting, it was just like a little too repetitive, and I had grown up watching like those old World's Strongest Man reruns on ESPN, which like are
Magnus for Magnuson or whatever.
Yeah, Jan Paul Sigmarsson, Bill Kazmaier, Magnus for Magnuson, like all those guys. They were, and it was cool because like that era of strong, they were like wrestlers, in terms of the person. They're so over the top, and so yeah. And I actually just did a competition actually back in Tallahassee, and Brett Fain, who ran the Tallahassee Stones of Strength, he put it on, and there was a car flip So I got to flip a car. Like, where else? Anyone can go to a damn gym and bench. You know, who gets to go flip a car? You know, ever.
Yeah, I was pissed. I smoke a lot of weed, and like it was the end of the day, and I was like, "Fuck! I missed Harry at the damn proof."
No, it's okay. The weed stuff's good. Helps you relax. It's fine.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to get into. That's my last question. But for these strongman things, do they do any testing for like steroids or performing enhancing drugs or anything like that for the strongman stuff?
Strongman does not. Powerlifting does. They have tested and untested federations, but no, strongman on the amateur level or professional level does not do any testing for anabolics.
Because I'm this isn't like a steroid or anything, but I saw in one of your videos you like sniffed something.
Oh yeah, that's it's called ammonia. It's like smelling salts. Like
Oh,
you know,
okay.
some of the like medics will carry around. They have those little capsules. It's the same thing. So it's if someone so in that sense it's used. They'll crush it and they'll put it in the person's nose and it wakes them up. It's the same thing with the smelling salts, the ammonia. It's basically it like excites your nervous system essentially. So it's an external source you can use, and you'll basically I actually have a bottle right here. It's not, but basically, yeah, you'll see people and they'll take it, and if it's fresh, you can actually be like this far away, and they'll hit you. And if you know some people are really hardcore, and they'll put their whole nose in it. It'll make your eyes water and gives you like a boost of adrenaline, really wakes you up. Use it sparingly. You know what I mean? Don't use it for like dumbbell curls at the gym.
I'm gonna try that at work tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You'll be juiced for about 30 seconds, and you'll have to hit it again.
So what was the glue stuff that your buddy came over and you were putting on before the rock lift, the stones?
Yeah, that stuff's it's called tacky. It's I think the way they probably had it when they first started using this stuff was like pine tar or pine tacky, but now it's like not sure exactly what's in the formula, but it's an adhesive that you put like on your hands and your forearms, and what it helps to do is basically get more grip on the stone, because the limiting factor on those stones, it's not like how much you can deadlift or whatever, it's like your ability to produce crushing force into the stone to help retain grip on it. So it's pretty important for that. So I don't really use it when I train. I actually try to train without it to develop that strength to crush in. But then on competitions, I will use it. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Awesome, man. So yeah, last question from me is like, how do you feel about the mushrooms, like microdosing mushrooms and marijuana use for military and like police personnel for the PTSD stuff?
I think it's amazing. I think it's just I think for too long, like military communities, fire communities, police communities, and just because of the way like things were established and legalized in America, I think those communities have used alcohol to unfortunately deal with a lot of stuff. And the way I like to put it is like, when have you ever heard a doctor prescribing alcohol help ever? You know what I mean? But like, you look at all this research now about, you know, marijuana or THC or psychedelics, you know, mushrooms, and kind of the positive effects they can have. And they're tremendous, you know, with PTSD, you know, with anxiety, with any of these things. So I think it's an amazing tool for first responders and in military. And, you know, I'm really happy to see, you know, legislation is being passed, especially, you know, there's a lot of stuff being authorized right now for like special operations veterans with PTSD, like MDMA therapy, psilocybin therapy. Just psilocybin is what's in mushrooms. Yeah, and I just think it's an amazing tool, and I'm really happy to see more acceptance and knowledge about it, because I think for so long there's just been, you know, an incorrect stigma about the type of people who use them, or what they're using them for. And that being said, doing it in an educated way or an assisted therapy way with like a professional is very important. Education first and foremost for any of that stuff, because there's definitely just like alcohol. There's a good way to do it and there's a bad way to do it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So educating.
Yeah, there's so much information out there now where, I mean, like anyone who thinks that it's a negative thing anymore, like they're fooling themselves,
Yeah, and it surprises me because I have conversations and there definitely are still some like stigmas about it.
Oh, absolutely, dude. I smoke weed every day. I know all about it.
Yeah, there you go. And and people have these like preconceived notions in their mind about like what that means about you, but like that's
Yeah. Yeah, like I still have friends, like people that I've known since I was a child, like, but they're older people who've never consumed cannabis, and like they still will when they are talking about me, like Casey said, they'll still go, oh, I had the best time ever. It's like we just had an hour and a half conversation.
In fairness, you do sound like that.
So I thought of something else here before I hand it over to Ray for our last segment. Any political future for Harry Walker?
No, I don't. There's nothing in the cards right now, and yeah, I mean, I would have to hire like a really good publicist to cover up all the stuff I've done in my life. If I ever wanted to do that, I don't think. I think I burned my bridges to politics a long time ago. So yeah, maybe after everything's all said and done, if I can get a good team on my side. But no, I don't think so.
All right, we have a last segment here. We call it Real Questions. Okay. It's a question that unless you have anything else, Ray. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm ready. Let's do the real question.
All right. So this is a question that Ray is going to ask you, and you have 1 minute to answer it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Okay. In the video we watched of you in the strongman competition, you have a kilt on. Is that because you like the way the air flows underneath it?
So, short answer, yes, of course. A lot of the time I compete in these jorts, and I'm not gonna lie to you, pretty restrictive, not a lot of good like airflow going on there. But thankfully, with the kilt, I decided to change it up and let things breathe a little bit more. So yeah, I appreciate that. It's good that the people know that for quality airflow, just compete in the kilt. You'll never want to go back.
Awesome, man. So that's something I completely skipped on, and I forgot about it in my notes. What is the deal with the jorts?
Oh, so yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I am a big believer, just kind of in like the personas and like the strength and just the character of like the 80s. Like I grew up on a lot of those movies and like those personas and the fashion. Like I have this expression I call it 80s big, and because if you look at some of like the best and most like ridiculous athletes in the 80s, they wore like the most absurd clothing, like bright, like skin tight, whatever, and no one could say anything because they were like the biggest, strongest characters in the room. So I'm trying to live up to that ideal. And I'm trying to get 80s big, just so, because I know it looks ridiculous. I'm under no illusions that I'm fashion forward. Like I know I don't look good, I look dumb, but that's okay. And I competed in them one time, and I just liked the way it felt, and I got some good feedback, so I just kept it rolling. So
yeah, it's awesome, man. I loved it. I love the 80s big, and I know that you're a Ric Flair fan because I saw all of your hashtags on your one post, the jet fly.
Oh yeah.
Kiss stealing, wheeling dealing.
One of my actually the shirt that I'm wearing, one of the rugby teams that I played on, we would do a little Ric Flair chant before we would go out there and hit some bodies. So it's stuck with me.
Awesome, man. I love it, man. Yeah, your enthusiasm just behind anything that you do is just incredible, man. I wish that today's generation would try and find some hardships for themselves, because it's not something that kids are looking to do.
Yeah, I mean, it is really important, and yeah, I can't speak enough to the benefits that just doing hard things is going to do for you in your life, and just the way it also makes you care about other people. Because honestly, if, out of all these things that I've done, the thing that I've learned is when you're in these really difficult times and situations with other people, you really form some amazing bonds. And you become very attached. You want to take care of those people, and I think it's a great way to not only build your character, but also, just humanize yourself and learn to be really empathetic and look to take care of each other, which I think we all need to do a little bit more of.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love it, man. Thank you so much, dude. Please plug away where people can find you.
Yeah, so you can follow Warhorse on Instagram, and it'll be war_horse_athletics. You can also find me, my personal page on Instagram. It's at HJDWalker. And yeah, those are the best ways to get in touch. And if you have any questions about anything I talked about today, or you want to get some training going through Warhorse, I'd be more than happy to answer you or help you out within reason.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, man. This was a blast, man. This was a fun one.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's amazing.
Thank you, man. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.